Not trying to drama farm. Post link to Drew Pavlo. Tweet drama farming. What is this?
Take? Why is that a bad take? Dude, someone is messaging this appropriately. Holy shit. It's not.
Holy shit, he talks
he's
fast.
Right. He's right. Democrats should not be in favor of free trade. Democrats should be the first to acknowledge that free trade is what has gutted the American manufacturing capabilities, destroyed the American labor force, destroyed the countryside. He's a good messenger on this. Bad take? Why is that a bad take? Free trade is nice. Without free trade, or with free trade, you have no manufacturing. Without manufacturing, you have no labor force. Without the labor force, you have no labor power. Without labor power, you have no way to...
Wait. I'm sorry. Hold on. What?
Trade is nice. Without free trade, or with free trade, you have no manufacturing. Without manufacturing, you have no labor force. Without the labor force, you have no labor power.
Without manufacturing, you have no labor force? Free trade means no manufacturing?
Without labor power, you have no way to... Without labor power, you have no labor unions. Without labor unions, you have no way to increase wages. Without increasing your wages, you arrive at what America is doing currently, which is 23% underemployment, gig economy jobs galore, no protections whatsoever, no mechanism of pushback against the one party that's supposed to be against the right-wing reactionary forces, and you arrive at a nation with no healthcare, with no future, no retirement funds, a nation in disarray. All of it ties back to labor at the end of the day. Free trade is nice if you are not in the US, though. No, it's not. That's also incorrect. What are you talking about? Free trade is not nice. Do you believe the fucking WTO narrative that free trade has actually greatly improved the living standards of all these other countries? No, obviously it has not. That is not the case at all. The one country that has actually been able to dramatically improve itself in that process is China, and that is not because of the free trade. That is because of what they did with the foreign capital that came in.
I'm uneducated. Is he wrong? Yeah, pretty much everything he said here is incorrect. Yeah, there are some like broader points here that you could say are correct, like in a sentiment kind of way, but not like really. The clip is sped up? Really? He might be trying to allude to capitalism? Really? He's talking about capitalism? That's crazy. No, it's pretty wrong. Like very wrong, but yeah. Pretty sure even Marx argued against tariffs and other like ill-advised protectionist policies. Was Marx wrong about anything? He was probably racist. What would your version of this statement be? Well, my version of the statement would be not saying it because it's wrong. I don't know. It's fine. Nah, hard disagree. Whether or not you agree is irrelevant to me. There's like serious errors here. It's not really like a point you can agree or disagree on. It's not an opinion-based thing. It's just factually incorrect. I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to argue against like shit like NAFTA, World Trade Organization, IMF, like neoliberalism broadly. But the problem is that like while neoliberalism encourages free trade, the free trade part of neoliberalism isn't the problem with neoliberalism. That's not the issue, really. At least not in the context of it being used here. Oh, whatever. Stupidest thing he said was him implying service sector workers are not laborers, but manufacturing workers are. Yeah, I don't really understand the whole, like, with free trade, you have no manufacturing, and without manufacturing, you don't have a labor force. I don't really understand that. Can have, like, sectoral unions in all kinds of industries. He never said that.
Hey, free trade is nice. Without free trade, or with free trade, you have no manufacturing. Without manufacturing, you have no labor force. Without the labor force, you have no labor power. Without labor power, you have no way to... Without labor power, you have no labor unions. Without labor unions...
It was somewhere in there that he said it. Well. Yeah. Yeah, I think... I guess, like, the problem... Free trade works only among non-peer... or near peers. No. That's not true. Like, free trade is good. In the sense that, like, tariffs and stuff are bad, right? Like, you can selectively apply these in certain industries to bolster domestic production. We understand there are caveats to this, but, like, those are very specific strategies. The idea that free trade, broadly speaking, is bad just isn't true. You can't be wrong-headed about this, because I don't want people doing this, like, MAGA reach-around thing, where they're like, you know, obviously Trump is bad, but the Democrats will never back the tariffs or whatever. First of all, there are Democrats who are like half-heartedly defending the tariffs. And second of all, that's also bad. Tariffs are implemented to protect domestic capital unjustifiably. We have tariffs on Chinese cars because our cars are overpriced and suck. But we want to protect our domestic manufacturing, even though it sucks. Like, it would be better if everyone was just driving a fucking Chinese car, you know? Yeah, you get me. Wondering if you've done Bernie's CNN town hall? Are you referring to the fact that Bernie Sanders also has protectionist tendencies? I don't think protectionism would have been good while manufacturing jobs were still here at all, Knob Gobbler. I think it's a good thing to take advantage of the comparative benefits some countries have over others when it comes to their specialties and what they're capable of doing. The problem ultimately is that, like, the underlying issue, which is the relegation of shit work to people who the shit work can be placed on, is a feature of capitalism regardless of free trade, right? In America, we did it to slaves, then sharecroppers. We've always done it to the poor. When you open up foreign markets, you know, you can externalize that process, but the underlying tendency remains the same. What is the most, you know, underprivileged group of people possible that we can foist this work onto? You know, who can we force to do the shit work so we don't have to pay them that much, you know? What about unequal exchange? Doesn't that benefit only the superpowers, and free trade would help exploit that even more? But that's not a feature of free trade. You can do that without free trade, right? Like those, if you're referring to like an imbalance in what? Like in the value or the exploitation, we're not talking about free trade at this point. We're talking about like broader elements of neocolonialism. Fact is, unless you're doing something very specific, tariffs are just plain bad policy. You know? It should, like, because we're talking about tariffs here, right? What else are we talking about? We're talking about tariffs, I assume. I'm talking about EU exports of highly subsidized goods like vegetables or textiles outcompeting African farmers. Africa having tariffs on our goods be a good thing. Like to protect domestic industries so that they don't get completely bought out by foreigners. Sure, that's fine. But I would support that policy when being done by them. That's not the same as the statement being made in the clip here, though, right? Like, that would be an example of, like, an underprivileged country trying to protect their own domestic production, which is fine, you know? But that's not really like a repudiation of broader, like, free trade agreements or whatever, you know? That's not necessarily the thing being talked about. Yeah, well, what's the last, like, 5 seconds of the clip?
The only thing that free trade benefits is capital owners. That's why America did it for so many years.
That's not true. It's made things cheaper, like, all over the world for everyone, basically.
People say, we don't want free trade, we want fair trade. You can't have fair trade without...
Okay, whatever. All right, well, seems like a pretty minor thing. Granted, but there is this free trade religion that makes the IMF make financial aids dependent on poor countries opening their markets totally. Yeah, but I've argued against that for the entire time that I've been streaming, you know? So, like, you know where I am on this. Like, I think that the World Bank and the IMF, they should all be, like, they've committed crimes for what they've done to, you know, these countries. But I've always said that, you know? But that's not, again, it's not really an issue with, like, free trade broadly. That's them being bullied and coerced by exploitative, manipulative lenders, you know? Like, that's... I mean, by saying free trade, generally speaking, is good, I'm not saying everything you can do through free trade is good. I'm saying that the underlying expectation that goods and labor can move more or less freely between countries does benefit people. All right, well, good drum bait. Very good. Very good. Now Vaush thinks he's a finance bro after 1 week of wearing a suit. I don't think talking about free trade is really a finance bro thing. That's more like macroeconomics, right? Finance bro would be like stock investment stuff. Vaush, economics isn't your strong suit. You can always tell you've got a point when people say shit like, you're wrong, but I can't say how. They love saying that.